Hello everyone. Welcome to Daily English Practice. Improve your English through English stories. Once upon a time, a poor woodcutter lived in a small cottage on the edge of a dark forest with his wife and two children, Hansel and Gretel. The family was very poor, and there was often not enough food to eat. The woodcutter's wife, who was the children's stepmother, was a cruel woman. One evening, as the children lay in bed, they overheard her whispering to their father, "We have too many mouths to feed. There is barely enough food for us. Tomorrow, we must take the children deep into the forest and leave them there. Otherwise, we will all starve." The woodcutter was heartbroken, but he was too weak to argue with his wife. Hansel and Gretel, hearing their stepmother's plan, were terrified. But Hansel was clever. As soon as their parents were asleep, he crept outside and filled his pockets with small white pebbles that shone in the moonlight. The journey into the forest. Early the next morning, their stepmother woke them up and handed them a small piece of bread each. Then, she led them deep into the forest with their father. As they walked, Hansel secretly dropped the white pebbles behind them, one by one. When they reached the heart of the forest, their parents lit a fire and told them to rest. "Stay here, children," their father said sadly. "We will return soon." But Hansel and Gretel waited for hours, and no one came back. Night fell, and the forest was full of strange sounds. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I left a trail of pebbles. We can follow it home." When the moon rose, the pebbles shone brightly, leading the children safely back to their house. Their father was overjoyed to see them, but their stepmother was furious. Lost in the forest. A few days later, the cruel woman took them into the forest again. This time, Hansel had no pebbles, so he dropped breadcrumbs instead. But when night fell, they discovered that the birds had eaten all the crumbs. They were lost. They wandered through the forest for 2 days, hungry and tired. Then, suddenly, they saw a strange little house made entirely of sweets. The walls were made of gingerbread, the roof was covered in frosting, and the windows were made of sugar. "Look, Gretel, a house we can eat," Hansel cried. The starving children ran to the house and began to nibble on the walls. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and an old woman appeared. "My dear children," she said sweetly, "come inside. You must be so tired and hungry." She led them inside and gave them warm milk, pancakes, and sweet apples. Hansel and Gretel were delighted. But the old woman was not kind, she was a wicked witch who lured children into her house to eat them. The witch's trap. The next morning, the witch grabbed Hansel and locked him in a cage. "You will be my dinner," she cackled. "Gretel, you will be my servant." Poor Gretel was forced to cook and clean while Hansel was trapped. Every day, the witch checked Hansel's finger to see if he was fat enough to eat. But clever Hansel held out a thin bone instead. The witch had poor eyesight, so she thought he was still too skinny. After a few weeks, the witch grew impatient. "I don't care if you're fat or thin," she snapped. "Tomorrow, I will eat you anyway." She ordered Gretel to heat the oven. But Gretel was quick-witted. "I don't know how to light it," she said. The witch grumbled and opened the oven to show her. In that moment, Gretel pushed the old witch inside and slammed the door shut. The wicked woman screamed, but soon, she was gone. Returning home, Gretel rushed to free Hansel, and together they explored the witch's house. They found chests full of gold and jewels. "We will never be poor again," Hansel exclaimed. They filled their pockets and left the house. After wandering for a while, they found a familiar path. Soon, they saw their father's cottage. When they ran inside, Their father hugged them tightly. "My dear children, I thought I had lost you forever," he cried. Their stepmother was gone, and the woodcutter was overjoyed to have his children back. With the treasure they brought, they never went hungry again, and they all lived happily ever after. Thanks for listening. Subscribe the channel for more interesting stories.